Hello, hello. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be doing a taste of something different. Usually, we try and lay out strategies and plans and ways of writing and communicating that will get you points that will help you get full credit for your assignments. And today, we're going to be talking about all the things that you probably shouldn't be doing because they will more likely than not get you points. So, with no further ado, this is our lighthearted look at bad discussion posts. And warning, they're going to be pretty bad. So, if you do something other than that, if you do something that actually follows the instructions, you're far more likely to get credit. All right, our example here is going to be taken from the NURO 338 course. This is a week one discussion question, and week one questions usually will ease you into the new topic, which doesn't stop some people from going in an entirely different direction, as you'll see soon. So, again, usually we encourage you to follow our advice and follow our examples. Today, we're going to be giving examples of what we really hope you do not do, because we'd like everyone to have a productive and engaging discussion. And that is a lot easier if you are doing the things that are asked and not going off in entirely different directions, as you'll see soon. So, this is coming from Neuro 338. This is the Pharmacology and Pathophysiology course for practicing nurses. And we can see that this prompt is going to be something about circulatory and respiratory systems. Great. So if we look at it, and I've modified the format of the instructions to just make it a little bit more clear how these different instructions are separated out as discrete requests. So we have our broader purpose, the framing statement. Okay, we're supposed to be applying what we've learned about the circulatory and respiratory systems and integrate this knowledge into practice, or tell us about how it might be integrated into practice. And we're specifically answering the question, what's the difference between the circulatory and respiratory systems in the body? And specifically, we need to compare and contrast that and share a patient experience of a common disorder and how you cared for a particular disease process, including pharmacological treatment. So at this point, this is going to be leveraging some prior experience, some clinical vignettes, perhaps. And we need to be not just making a post, but reading and responding to at least one other person in the course. And there's a note at the end, be sure to follow the discussion question guidelines. So, what are those guidelines? Well, it says we need to log in at least 2 or 3 days per week, and we need to answer all the discussion questions in a substantive manner. So, it's specifically saying this is not just a make a short post saying, huh, that was nice, or I thought a lot about this, and it was cool that we had this assignment. Well, give us something more. Well, we keep going, we see that the initial post needs to be up by Saturday at 11:59. That's a good thing. It stops you from procrastinating, and it also gives other people an opportunity to read your response and respond to it without having to check at the very last minute to see if someone has posted so that they to be able to make that second response. And we have here, we see that it's two deadlines. Make your initial post by Saturday, right before midnight, and another one by Monday, right before midnight. And a specific note, no late posting will be accepted. All right, sounds pretty straightforward. But we have some additional clarity that initial post should be a minimum of 300 words. For reference, that's going to be just a little bit over one double-spaced page using our APA course paper template. And we're supposed to make references to the readings and resources provided in the week. All right. Again, we need to respond to at least one classmate, ideally two, because it makes for a more interesting and dynamic discussion. And within that response, you should have a minimum of 100 words. And you can see in the last bullet here, it specifically says that you should be adding value to the conversation. And that's an important thing, to have something that is contributing, that is enhancing it. Now, it's certainly not saying that we don't like some encouragement and if people admire the things we've done to want to hear a little bit about that. That's good for everyone to know, hey, I'm doing good work. But we need something that is adding value. And we'll talk about some ways to not do that shortly. And again, that we have some Minimum standards: the initial post should be 300 words or more. The response should be a minimum of 100 words. And the instructions even go so far as to list some things that you could put to make it a more substantive response. Ask an insightful and probing question, and it's not going to be, one super long sentence. It's going to be a question, and then, perhaps tell us how that's important. Maybe show how research supports or contradicts the ideas that are being presented. And you can ask more than one question or ask sub questions to go with your main query. Share new insights. Maybe you had an experience that was different. Maybe you had an experience that changed your point of view and you want to present that to someone else, or that you're validating an idea with your own life or work experience. And perhaps make a suggestion or ask for more information on something. Well, let's talk about some ways that don't do the things that we were just talking about, that don't meet the requirements presented for this discussion assignment. So ultimately, we're presenting these to answer the question, well, what makes a bad response? If the instruction is saying good, what isn't good? And so one of these is the rehash response. This is a kind of trope where it's usually becomes clear that someone hasn't done the reading, and so they are trying to fill air. Think of a movie stereotype. Someone shows up late, they get called about something, and so they're trying to say something while trying to remember or make up something that sounds plausible or guess. But they end up just filling time and really wasting everyone's time. And a common way that this happens is when you just spend time or words repeating the instructions and make comments that don't really say anything. And ultimately, that avoids providing a substantive and meaningful response, which is what we like. So you might see some text like, oh, the instructions ask us to apply what we have learned about the circulatory and respiratory systems and integrate this knowledge into our practice. Well, that sounds important so far. This is a very important thing. In fact, understanding the similarities and differences between the two body systems is practically essential. Being able to share a patient experience of a common disorder and how you cared for a particular disease process, including pharmacological treatment, is a powerful thing for anyone to experience. Now, if you're reading this response, by this point, things are starting to feel a little bit odd. This says, this is an important thing. It's practically essential. Uh, says that it's a powerful thing, but there are no examples. There's no backing this up. And if you think about it for a moment, or perhaps the answer has already flashed into your mind, we look at that and say, hold on, I think that sounds really familiar because that's kind of the instructions, slightly paraphrased. It says, what is the difference between the circulatory and respiratory systems in your body? Compare and contrast them. Uh, yeah, and then you realize that, wait, this person has consumed about 75 words of space, not saying anything, and that is certainly not enhancing the discussion. So please do not give a rehash response. That's not going to help anyone, and it's certainly not going to help from the grade of anyone who submits that. So it's another bad response to give to a discussion prompt. Well, one of the really common ones is the late to the party response. And it's usually late, and not just a little, it's really late, like for that Saturday deadline. Oh, hey, that post is coming on Monday at 11 p.m. You're like, but this is days later. No one will have time for you to respond because you're doing it when everyone else is asleep. And generally, it will, because they're rushing and may or may not have done the reading or revisit the reading, they spend time apologizing instead of actually, doing what the prompt is asking you to do and responding to your colleagues. Like, hi guys, I'm so sorry that I didn't post before the deadline. Things have been really busy. I was starting to get ready to write my response and then something come up. I realized it was almost time for my favorite TV series to start, and afterwards I was just too tired. It won't happen again, I promise. Well, what would be really helpful, especially if it was a small group where someone has been waiting for your response so that they can respond to it in turn, uh, give us some content. What would not be helpful would be to have like, anyways, I read through all your responses and I don't think there's anything that I can add. You're all great and you've said everything. Well, that is not contributing substantively. Mm. Also, it's a lot easier to write about something other people haven't written about when you are coming earlier to the discussion, like in the original time frame. And so if you find that you're at loss for things to add to the discussion, join or start the discussion early. It's also one of these tropes is what I call the bland encouragement, where something is said, but it's not really doing anything. Like it doesn't explain how, why. So it might be true, but we're not really getting anything to add to it. And so you may have noticed this on a discussion board somewhere. The whole reply is great post or something to that effect, or thanks for responding. I agree. Or this is stupid. Now, sometimes these are a little bit more elaborate. You say, oh, I've read through your response and I just disagree wholeheartedly. And then it doesn't give any evidence, it doesn't give any argumentation. It just says, nope, not my thing. And ultimately, it's not helping the discussion move forward because you don't necessarily have to agree with someone. But please, if you're disagreeing with someone, tell us how and why and what the basis is for that. And there are lots of things that come up in healthcare, for example, where you might have a different experience or be in a different cultural context. The question of what kind of relationship you want to have with your primary care provider is kind of an existential one. A lot of med schools and a lot of nursing schools will say, you want to be really nice and be the patient's friend. And not everyone wants a friend in their primary care provider. In fact, some people want the opposite. You know, if you're someone's doing an exam or asking you questions about things that you'd rather keep more private, you might not want that to be a friend. You might want that to have more professional distance. And at the same time, the question of do you want your primary care provider to be more authoritative, more collegial, or collaborative? Yeah, that's an existential question. And what you like at one point of your life may be different at another. So, even if you do think a post is great, tell us why. Oh, that was a really interesting argument. Did not notice that detail in the reading. And I went back and looked at it elsewhere and realized that I had misconstrued that. Thank you for setting me straight. I went back now and I'd like to revise my earlier claim and say, okay, that was my misunderstanding. In light of this new information, here's the thing. And that takes us to a different point, and we can see how the ideas have evolved over time, which is great because who wants to go to school and not learn anything? We want to end up better at the things we are studying. And one way you can do that is show and acknowledge the change. All right, another type of bad response, one I call the sidetracker. And that's when you're introducing stuff that's not really relevant to the task at hand. And you've probably seen in your educational experience someone who's written a paper or a discussion post or a presentation that has gone this way. And it might give information that would be interesting conversationally or in a different part of the course, but in the here and now is just not what's being asked. And so, no matter how supported it is or isn't, the information still isn't relevant. If we're going through a webinar or a training that's supposed to be about selecting your benefits and your retirement package, and you go in and they say, well, we'd like to talk about how you're doing today. How are you feeling? Let's do a mindfulness workshop. And you're like, but I want to know what 401k option I should select and why. It's not that the other thing isn't necessarily important. I hope it's important for someone, something, somewhere, but that it's not what's being asked right now. And to go back to this discussion post, that might show up as something like, oh, well, I know the instructions say that we should talk about circulatory and respiratory systems, but I'm really a lot more interested in the endocrine system. Did you know that traditional Chinese medicine explored the concept of endocrinology more than 2,000 years ago? The endocrine system is very interesting because it integrates the neurological system with organs all over the body, even including the skin. Imagine that. It doesn't get more important than the pancreas, which works on digestion and the endocrine system through the hormones and enzymes it releases. Now, separate from this discussion, I would say that the pancreas is a very interesting organ for how and it does different things, and disorders of the pancreas are certainly very serious matters. Even the ways that the endocrine system works and how you think about how it has evolved, looking at one species to another and see the different variations that have certain repercussions, that's fascinating. And even the fact that something approximating our understanding of endocrinology was seized on in a traditional medicine tradition where certain practices are continued in part because they are now scientifically validated and have stood the test of time for 2,000 years. That's pretty impressive. But is it relevant to the prompt about circulatory and respiratory systems? Well, no. And even though it might have started from saying, hey, these are kind of tangentially related, it really goes off on a far tangent. And that is not, even if it was immaculately written, uh, even if it was backed up by scholarly sources, and I'd say life science and BD editors, those are not terribly authoritative. Those aren't the textbooks and other assigned readings for this assignment, so it really wouldn't be a great one to have. So let's do a quick recap of those things that we talked about. So we got the rehash response, where you ultimately don't end up saying anything, and when people recognize this, there are probably sites on the internet that you stumbled onto looking for something, and it takes forever to tell you the thing you're looking for, or it doesn't at all. And that rehash is just not helpful. The late to the party response, uh, there's this saying, actions speak louder than words. If it's a one time thing and the next times you are on time or ideally early on your responses, great. But if someone is reading your post and it came late, it'd be good to be adding something to the discussion. But encouragement, I'm just going to read those four out and say, please don't just write, great post. Thanks for responding. I agree. This is stupid. And other things that are, if perhaps a little longer than that, are not adding anything more. And then the side tracker, where it doesn't really matter if you are trying to extol the virtues of, let's say, a Lamborghini sports car, when I'm here to buy a minivan. The Lamborghini does not do the thing I need. It may technically carry me from one place to another, but I'm trying to buy a van to carry, let's say, 8 members of my household around. It's a fundamentally different thing than what is of interest and required. So let's make sure that we keep things relevant. So with that, uh, please do follow the instructions for discussion posts. Please do not do any of the bad response things that we have talked about today. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can go to my.acu.edu to sign up for a new appointment, and you can go to the Online Writing Center website to access recordings of webinars, download templates, see various guides, read blog posts on topics of interest, and generally find help with the writing tasks that you have in front of us. All right. With that, I bid you good night.